But of all these things, the best thing I have done is to attend the 40th anniversary celebration of Prison Fellowship here in Perth. It's a great honor for me to be here, and I mean that. I really am honored to be present at this great and important day. And I hope at the end of this day, you feel terrific about Prison Fellowship. I hope all the time you feel terrific about the gospel. I hope all the time you feel terrific about the mission that you do in prisons. But sometimes it might be more difficult to feel great about some of the struggles that Prison Fellowship has. At the end of today, you should feel terrific about Prison Fellowship. I'm going to tell you 4 obvious facts, so obvious that most of us ignore them. And the first is that in Scotland, we do not lock up a cross-section of the population. We lock up people who are male, young, and poor. Of course, we do lock up some people who are women, and every one of them is a tragedy. But the vast majority of people we lock up are male, and that's true all over the world. Indeed, the percentage of people who are women in prison is almost the same all over the world, whether it's in the United States, where they lock up vast numbers of people, or in Finland, where they lock up very few people. The number of women who are locked up is the same percentage, and nobody knows why. So there's a little challenge for people who think about prisons. Why is it all over the world it's the same number of same percentage who are women? But the vast majority are young, male, and poor. And that's the fault of Scotland. Of course, it's the fault of people who are locked up, but it's also the fault of Scotland. We're never going to have better prisons until we have a better Scotland. And we're never going to have a better Scotland until we have better prisons. So my first obvious fact is that the people we lock up are young, male, and poor. My second obvious fact is an obvious fact about the churches. That the people who go to church are the opposite. They are overwhelmingly not young, overwhelmingly not male, and overwhelmingly not grindingly poor. And that's very true of my church. It will be untrue in odd places here and there. There will be some vibrant churches, which are nothing like the majority of churches. But if we're being realistic about the state of the Christian faith in Scotland, most of the people who care about church commitment are not young, are not male, and are not poor. So there is that huge gap. How is that huge gap ever to be crossed? One key answer to that is Prison Fellowship. Prison Fellowship is one key way of crossing that uncrossable gap between the average constituency of our prisons and the average constituency of our churches. So I am here to thank God for Prison Fellowship. Even if you weren't here in the room and I wasn't heard being say it, I still thank God for Prison Fellowship. For 40 years of committed, faithful service to the King and Head of the Church. For 40 years of committed and faithful service, which has grown, developed, changed. I can't wait to read. Of course, the bit I'm going to read first in the book is a bit I wrote, but apart from that, I can't wait to read what the story tells. For example, the way Prison Fellowship caught the mood, fastened on to the value of restorative justice. I mean, if ever there were 2 words which are constitutive of the gospel, it's restorative justice, but that Prison Fellowship should catch on to that and be of such use to our prison community because of what you've done with restorative justice is a great tribute to you and something that I am very grateful for. And I have a little plea to Prison Fellowship. It's been obvious from the start that Prison Fellowship has found it easiest to feel at home and affirmed and valued within the evangelical parts of the Christian community in Scotland. That's not me. That's not where I live. And my plea for prison fellowship is that you should be extending and growing and embracing more and more of what sometimes called mainstream churches, like the church of which I'm a minister, where prison fellowship has so much to offer, both to the conscience of liberal Christians like me and also to the faith of liberal Christians like me. And so that's my plea to you, that you shouldn't think that Christians who are not members of congregations that call themselves evangelicals don't have something real to offer to prison fellowship. So that's an obvious fact about prisoners, an obvious fact about the church community, an obvious fact, the obvious fact about prison fellowship is how precious prison fellowship is, and then an obvious fact about the gospel. It's such an obvious fact about the gospel that most of us ignore it most of the time, but it's central to the way St. Mark writes his gospel. It's central to the way St. Mark writes his gospel. The first story of Jesus is the story of the baptism of Jesus. And Jesus hears the word, "This is my beloved." Think how important that is. In Mark's gospel, Jesus says nothing until he hears, "This is my beloved." Jesus does nothing until he hears, "This is my beloved." It's these words of God, "This is my beloved," which are completely transformative. That's the gospel. That's the gospel of God, the good news of God, that each one is a cherished, eternally loved, beloved one. And it's when we hear that we are able to share, to give, to live the love of God. Jesus heard that before he said a word. How many people in our jails do not know that they are the infinitely precious, beloved children of God? And it's until they hear that they're never going to be free. It's until the people in the main streets in Perth, it's until the people in the houses in which we live, it's until my family here, "You are the beloved, precious, eternally valued child of a God who will never let you go." Brian Suter was very, very good talking about three of the people that Jesus met. And I don't want to take a word away from what he said, but I do want to add a word to what he said. Because of course, Jesus was conversational, confrontational, interrelational with these three people. But above and below and beneath and behind all that, he loved them. He loved the woman at the well. He loved Zacchaeus. He loved the person with the evil spirit cast out. That's what we're about. We love because he loved us first. We love in prison fellowship because he loved us first. The church of which I'm a minister, of which I am not ashamed, of which I'm proud to be a minister of the Church of Scotland, the church of which I am a minister asks people who want to be ministers in the church 8 questions. In the Salvation Army, this may no longer be true because my links with the Salvation Army, however much I admire them, are flimsy. Indeed, my only real relationship with the Salvation Army is that I was once kissed by a woman who was kissed by General Booth, which I suppose is a kind of apostolic succession. It used to be, at least, that when they were commissioning officers in the Salvation Army, they asked them one question only. Are you ready to love the unlovable? That's a question that every Christian could deal with and could long and pray to be able to answer yes. Are you ready to love the unlovable? I bless Prison Fellowship because so often you are ready to do just that. Thank you for having me here today.